All right, everybody, welcome in and welcome back. It is From the Pocket coming at you on a Thursday. Here to talk some more offseason stuff. Now, we did not get our special preview from Christian, unfortunately. That's going to have to wait a little bit, but I've still got plenty of stuff to go over with you today. Today, we are going to be talking about the 10 most interesting teams to me this offseason. Now, last week, obviously, I did the top 10 teams that I think are probably getting a little too much hype, that I think people believe their offseason could be stronger than I think it actually might end up being because of, resource issues, cap stresses, etc. These to me are the 10 most interesting teams. The teams that have a lot at stake, the teams that have the biggest questions. Can they solve this particular challenge? And, if they don't, what happens to them? Do we have some coaches on the hot seat? Are we looking at maybe some structural changes to the team? Is this kind of the 1 year they're trying to have it come together? And if they don't have it come together, what happens next? So a lot of fun. And then getting into our episode for Monday, just to give you a sneak preview, I was going to go over what I'm calling kind of 2 early predictions. So they're not really predictions as much as they are just loose thoughts and ideas I have going into the new season. Definitely not locking in any predictions. We haven't even done free agency yet or the draft, so want to see how these teams do. But I did want to give 5 teams I think could miss the playoffs that made them last year. And then I also want to do 5 teams that I think could make the playoffs that missed them this past year. Now, again, that's not necessarily going to be hard predictions. I'm not going to sit here and say this team is going to be here. I believe it, but it's just kind of floating some ideas, some things to pay attention to, some maybe thoughts that maybe people aren't thinking about in that way. So, and then give you a super sneak preview next week. We're going to have all of our free agency breakdown. Again, we're trying to just get this content out ahead of free agency starting. Want to just make sure that we are staying ahead of that, giving a rundown of what teams are looking at, making sure we're hitting all the key storylines and things of that nature as the real offseason begins. But next week, I'm going to go probably deep dive into the free agency class, talk about where I think the class is maybe getting a little overrated, maybe where it's getting a little underrated, where I'd like to see some certain players go, and where I think teams could maybe hit their needs and where I think they might actually wait until the draft. So all of that free agency content is coming next week, so stay tuned for that. And then, of course, after free agency, I'm going to be obviously talking about how I thought teams did in free agency, but we're right around the corner from draft prep. I'm still doing my watch list. I'm still getting my homework done on the draft class this year. So that is going to be coming as well, just giving my thoughts, giving my predictions, maybe a mock draft. So again, it's all happening very, very quick, and we are hurtling toward really the crux of this offseason, which is that free agency and that draft. The combine starts this afternoon if you're watching this on Thursday. So a lot of moving parts. The season just ended, but it picks right back up, and we're back in the swing already thinking about that 2026-2027 season. So we can go ahead and get started today. Again, just one thing to do today. We're going to talk about the top 10 most interesting teams this offseason. Now, when compiling this list, again, my criteria, like last week, was a little loose. I'm not trying to go off of this is what this criteria is supposed to be, but it's more just teams I find interesting, teams that I think have a lot of questions or very interesting circumstances that are maybe not expected given maybe who they are. The Chiefs are going to be on this list, right? The Steelers are a team that I think is very interesting with what they're doing and what they're trying to do. Even some bad teams that I think are going to be terrible this year. The Jets are on this list. What are they doing? Those are teams but they have 2 first rounders. They have 2 first rounders. They got some draft capital to spend, but they also just fired their entire coaching staff, not named Aaron Glenn, and they don't have a quarterback. So very interesting. We're going to go ahead and get into it, and I'm going to start off the top with what I think. I'm very curious to see what this team is going to do this offseason. The Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers have really, I think one major question that they need to address. They need to address that interior offensive line. Now, I am confident that they're probably going to be able to hit at least one of those needs in free agency, but ultimately, obviously with Rashawn Slater and with Joe Alt, their tackles are set. Like they don't feel like they need their tackles, addressed in any way. Maybe some depth because they saw injuries there last year, but ultimately the question for this team is going to be, can they address their interior line? They have really 3 offensive linemen that are not likely to be on this team unless they sign them. The big question to me is Zion Johnson. If they sign Zion Johnson, which I think they probably should, Zion Johnson had a very good back half of his season. He struggled against the Patriots in that playoff game, but ultimately, if you don't sign him, right, you're going to be stuck needing 3 distinct players in the interior line, and that is a tough place to be, especially in a free agency draft class that is not that strong when it comes to guards. You do have Tyler Linderbaum, who I think is going to be, he is the top center of this free agency draft class. And, their general manager, Joe Ortiz, he was in Baltimore. He was part of that Baltimore front office who drafted Tyler Linderbaum. So that is a need meets a well-known commodity for them. So I believe they're going to go all out on getting Tyler Linderbaum. And if they sign Zion, who again was showing really promising flashes at the end of last year, and they're able to go get Tyler Linderbaum, you're going to go into the draft really just needing to take care of that guard spot. And they have, you could spend a first rounder on that. They have a mid to late kind of first round pick. I think they're picking 22 off the top of my head. So you could go get a guard there. You could also just wait till day 2. So I think that really is how they solve those issues. But even beyond the offensive line, I think they do have some questions on that defense, right? I did love, and I think everybody did, the Mike McDaniel hiring. Obviously, with what Mike McDaniel brings, you're going to see him probably be able to, I guess how you say, adjust better than what Greg Roman was able to do. Greg Roman, this has been the big knock with Greg Roman, right? Greg Roman, when he has just never been good at adjusting. It happened in Baltimore. It obviously happened both these past couple seasons with the Chargers where, you just end up not being able to protect Justin Herbert, or you end up not giving Justin Herbert really help from an offensive schematic standpoint. And Justin Herbert is left having to basically shoulder the load, go into creation mode way earlier than he probably wants to. And ultimately, you kind of leave him holding the bag. Mike McDaniel, that is not going to happen. I think the offense is going to be better for that, but I think, again, it starts with drafting or addressing that interior line. But as far as the defense, they've lost Jesse Minter, right? They lost him to Baltimore. They did end up promoting their safeties coach off the top of my head. I can't remember his name. I apologize. But a lot of questions about, what is going to happen? Khalil Mack, are they going to bring him back? Are they going to sign Thule to an extension? There's a couple of questions on that defensive front, and I think they really need to figure out what they're going to do in that sense, because you have Tier Tart, right? And I actually was reading this from The Athletic, and I thought this was a really interesting way to look at it. Tier Tart is obviously a very, very good run defender, but Tier Tart has been at his best when he has somebody next to him that is really able to hold down those gaps in an effective way, and it allows Tier Tart to almost kind of freelance a little bit. And, they had that with Poona Ford. They had that a little bit this year, but I think they're really going to need to figure that entire defensive line. Just, again, what is happening with their edge rushers? Are they going to be able to bring in somebody or at least extend somebody on their team currently to match with Tier Tart to kind of give him that stability to let him do maybe what he wants to do and bring out his most effective game? A lot of questions for the Chargers. So I do like what I'm seeing from them, and I am confident that this front office is going to figure it out. But I am worried about that defense taking a step back. I think the interior offensive line stuff they'll be able to handle, but A lot of interesting questions for the Chargers, so we're going to see where they land. So I have them as one of my most interesting teams. And to kind of wrap up the Chargers for you, they have a ton of salary cap space. They have, according to Over the Cap, they have the second most effective cap space this year, only behind the Titans. So they're going to have a lot of money to go out and address whatever needs they want. This team has really made it an emphasis under the Harbaugh-Ortiz era to not really spend a lot of money like that in free agency. But, I mean, at some point, you have the money, you have these glaring holes. I know you don't want to overpay, and I know that's kind of the what you say mantra of this front office is like, we're not going to overpay for a free agent. But if you overpay for one or two guys and it knocks out a huge hole, and you're, especially if you're able to go into the draft with not needing to fix a glaring hole with your first and second round pick, but instead you're building a surplus because you were able to address those holes in free agency, at least effectively. Not even saying you made it a strength, just not where it's not a glaring weakness. I think that's really going to help. So that's what I'm hoping they do. But yeah, Chargers are on this list. I have the Chiefs next. And the Chiefs are on this list for the sole reason of they have a top 10 pick for the first time in, I think, since Andy Reid's first ever draft pick when he was picking first overall in 2013. He picked Eric Fisher. I think that was the last time the Chiefs had a top 10 pick. It gets really hard to build your team when you're picking 31 or 32 year after year after year like they have. And to give them a top 10 pick, you're no longer kind of filling depth with the draft. You are actually able to go out and get a bona fide day one high level starter. And I just, off the top, again, I don't have too much to say about this team. They still have a lot of cap space issues to clear up. Questions about what are they going to do with their running back situation? Are they going to be able to fix their offensive line any further? How are they going to address their receiver issues, given the fact that Rashee Rice is in trouble again? What's going to happen with their tight end room? What's going to happen with their defensive line? Are they going to trade away Trent McDuffie? There's a lot of questions that they are going to have to answer. And given the fact that they have the 9th overall pick, I think it's very curious to see where they go. I think a lot of people have them. They think that Jeremiah Love is going to the Chiefs. I'm not saying it won't happen, but if you're a Chiefs fan and you're rooting for Jeremiah Love, I would not get your hopes up. That this is the first time that the Chiefs have a top 10 pick in over a decade. They are not going to spend that on a running back. I don't think they will. I think this front office is smarter than that. I think when you have a top 10 pick, you have a real opportunity to knock out a tackle spot for the next half a decade. Get a bona fide blue chip edge rusher that can really help set you up for that depth that you've been missing on your defensive line now for a couple of years. I don't think they're going to go get a corner. They do such a good job drafting corners late in the draft. I don't really think they need that. But the idea that they're going to go get a running back with the 9th overall pick when there is a plethora of really good running backs. I'm not saying they're going to be as good as Jeremiah Love, but you could go get Travis Etienne. You could go get Kenneth Walker in free agency, pay him probably what you would have to pay Jeremiah Love, taking him in the top 10. And yeah, are you going to get as much production? No, but you can still get 80 to 90% of that production, still set your offense up really nicely, be the best running back you have had with Patrick Mahomes in his entire career, really. I mean, Isaiah Pacheco was awesome, but Travis Etienne in this system, Kenneth Walker in this system would be Chiefs fans will have forgotten since Jamal Charles how good a running back could be in a Kansas City Chiefs uniform. I just do not believe they're going to spend that on Jeremiah Love. I think they're going to try to fix that need in free agency, and they're going to go get a blue chip, half a decade kind of guy that they can have be their starter and go rack them up a bunch of sacks or go protect Patrick Mahomes. So just off their top 10 pick, I have the Chiefs on this list. Next, I have the Vikings solely because what is going on with their quarterback situation? they really, really, I guess for lack of a better way to put it, pooped the bed this past season. They went out, spent a bunch of money, moved off of Sam Darnold, didn't lock down Daniel Jones because he left for Indy. Both of them obviously want to have a lot of success this past season. And now they're stuck with J.J. McCarthy, and they have a roster that's kind of win yesterday. Not even win now. It is win yesterday. And you look at a lot of, I mean, they're way over the cap. They're the team that is the most over the cap of any team this year. Outside of the Cowboys, actually, as of right now, $48 million over the cap, second most. And they're going to lose a lot of the talent that they brought in to patch up last year. They're going to lose some offensive line talent. They're probably going to lose some running back talent. They're probably going to lose some defensive talent. And you're not getting any better at quarterback probably unless you're going to try to bring in somebody to compete with J.J. McCarthy, which they might. But it's one of those situations where it feels like they went all in on this roster, gambling that they could get it done with J.J. McCarthy, and then J.J. McCarthy just didn't get it done. And now you're losing all that talent you brought in this past year. And I don't know if you can do it, but I'm curious to see what they do. I'm curious to see how they answer that question. I'm curious to see how they taper over some of these holes that are going to naturally be created as a result of their salary cap situation, and if they can make themselves a viable contender this year. Because, again, like, this was a roster that's kind of built to win yesterday, and they really, I mean, they weren't close. I mean, they didn't even make the playoffs. So I have the Vikings on this list just for that reason. Next on this list, the defending Super Bowl champion, the Seattle Seahawks. I just love how the Seahawks have built their team. I am a little curious about what their prospects are because they are going to lose some talent. Obviously, they have almost $60 million in effective cap space, so they should be able to go out and fill up some of that, some of those holes. But obviously, you've lost Clint Kubiak. Cannot underestimate how big of a loss it can be losing an offensive coordinator. Go ask the Lions what happened when they lost Ben Johnson. Like, the Lions fans will tell you, you cannot underestimate losing a coordinator. And I'm curious to see how the Seahawks deal with that. If they can find somebody that can help Sam Darnold play within the system, keep him upright, if they're going to continue to try to bolster that offensive line, what they're going to do to add depth to that defense. Just a few questions. So I don't really have too much on the Seahawks, but it's not, I don't feel like it's often you have a team that just won the Super Bowl with what we perceive a loaded roster, and they're going into the offseason with $60 million in cap space. I mean, the Eagles won the Super Bowl last year, and all the talk about the Eagles were like, okay, where are they going to trim back? Where are they going to lose guys? How are they going to handle, replacing this talent that's going to be walking out the door? The Seahawks, outside of a couple of key pieces, I'm not trying to underplay losing some of the players they're going to probably lose, but like, they have a lot of resources and they're not losing a lot. So really, outside of losing their offensive coordinator, this unit should be able to stay together. But the offensive coordinator is a big loss, so curious. And then we'll talk about Clint Kubiak's new team, the Raiders, picking first overall. Again, I really did like the Raiders picking Clint Kubiak as their coach. I really did feel like it was the Raiders showing a lot of forethought into what they are expecting this team to be. With Clint Kubiak, he is going to be able to get a quarterback that we maybe see as limited, sure, but can play in a system, maybe not even behind a great offensive line, and can produce offense that way. And I think that's what they're planning. They understand we're going to get Fernando Mendoza. Okay, so if we have Fernando Mendoza and a questionable offensive line that we can maybe throw some resources at, they have the third most effective cap space of any team this year. If we can add some pieces to the offensive line, we can maybe get a weapon. This is a deep receiver class. They have Ashton Genty. They have Brock Bowers. So, they have a good system. And if the Bears taught us anything last year when they went and did a similar thing where they went and got the hotshot offensive coordinator, it's, look, we're just going to build around our young quarterback and we'll worry about the defense later on. And that's going to be how we get this done. You have a lot of resources to throw at the offense this year. Go get your quarterback, get a guy and a coach who can teach that quarterback how to play in a system, and you'll probably have success. Now, unfortunately, they are in what I think is a loaded division in the Broncos, Chargers, and Chiefs in the AFC West. So I don't know how competitive they'll be in terms of a playoff spot, but I think it was a really smart pick by the Raiders to hire him. And I'm very curious to see how they tackle this offseason, if they are going to take a page out of the Bears book and just try to shotgun wedding this offensive line for Fernando Mendoza, go in there with maybe a second or third round receiver pick, because again, loaded receiver class. And I think the Raiders with Trey Tucker on the other side too, I mean, if he's your number 2, he was an ascending player. I think you could have a really competitive Raiders offense next year, a surprisingly competitive Raiders offense. So I really am curious to see what they do. They are one of the more interesting teams. And then I can't pass over my Dallas Cowboys, as you see, hovering and rotating behind me. I don't even know if the Cowboys offseason is going to be good, as I talked about in my last episode, but I am curious to see what they do. Apparently, they're thinking about franchise tagging George Pickens. I think that would be a terrible mistake, but it's an entertaining mistake. They have 2 first-round picks, no salary cap space. They can make some moves to really clear up a lot of salary cap space. I think I'm probably a little more worried about that than a lot of people are, but nevertheless, I don't see them being super active in free agency. I think they're really going to do what they've always done, and that is build through the draft, which to their credit, the Cowboys are very good at building through the draft. They have done a good job of drafting. I think they don't often trust their draft process enough and overpay a lot of their guys that they have drafted previously. And then I don't think they go and blend free agency as much as they should. And I think that's where they get these gaps and holes compared to teams like the 49ers and the Eagles, who are taking every avenue they can to build out their teams. But I am curious to see what the Cowboys do. I'm hoping to draft a Sonny Styles, a Caleb Downs type of player, and I really don't want to sign George Pickens. I would rather trade George Pickens for some draft capital and roll out with Ryan Flournoy, who showed a lot of strides last year. I think Javonte Williams signing was a really good signing. I think the offensive line is going to continue to take a step. If they can find a replacement for that right tackle spot, I really love what they're cooking with on the offensive line, but I worry they're going to sign George Pickens. I worry they're not going to be active in free agency, and I worry we're going to roll into this season with a lot of young talent on a defense that is transitioning, for the record. You know, Christian Parker is talking about running a 3-4 now, not a 4-3 that they have ran. So you're going to have to get a ton of new personnel in that front seven to really fit that scheme. Very interesting to see how they make it all work. It feels like it's a transition period for the Cowboys, and knowing the Cowboys, they don't really do transition periods. They try to sell every year as if they are actually a competitive team. And I don't see how they arrived at that point. So I have the Cowboys on this list. And then the last couple teams here, the Steelers. I mean, Mike McCarthy, Aaron Rodgers reunion is nuts. Are they actually going to follow through on that? Are they going to be in what it seems like a lot of teams are going to be in, the the Malik Willis sweepstakes? I don't know. Their roster is very old. It feels like they're still in that middle way of trying to transition out of having the current core to the new core. I was listening to the Athletic Football Show, and I thought they had a great point where they talked about how, you have the Steelers on one hand with this current older core and a budding new core, and it feels like they kind of need to commit to one or the other, and it doesn't feel like they're probably going to do that. It feels like they're probably going to try to split the difference and dip their feet into both of them, and I don't think that'll work. I think what you'll end up with is neither being as strong as it could have been, going all in on this core and saying, let's just go with what we have and seeing where we land, or saying we're going to cut our losses. It's going to be a tough year, but we need to bottom out. And then let's go into the following couple of years with a younger, newer team and some real draft capital and some real money. And then we can really talk about having a great team. I don't know what they're going to do, but I am curious to find out if they roll out Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy 8 years after that experiment ended the first time, when both were probably better and in their primes, or closer to their primes at least. Aaron Rodgers was in his prime. I just, no idea what this is going to look like in a division where the Bengals are probably going to be better, the Ravens are probably going to be better, the Chiefs are probably going to be better in the AFC. I just very curious. I just do not think it'll go very well. So I have the Steelers on this list. And then I have the Commanders. Just for, it feels like this team is already going into the next season on the hot seat. You know, is Jaden going to be able to stay healthy, or is he going to fall into that trap where we were all worried about? They obviously moved off of Cliff Kingsbury. They have 2 new coordinators coming in, which is, for those of y'all unaware, red alert sign for the head coach. When you're moving off of both your coordinators, that is basically a warning shot. You have one more season to make this work. If they come in and have a losing record, Dan Quinn is gone. Dan Quinn is gone. He is done. Can they stay healthy? I like a lot of their offensive pieces. Still some gaps to maybe clean up in the receiver room a little bit, in my opinion. What are they going to do at tight end? But really, obviously, the thing that this team needs to hit is defense. They have the 7th overall pick, so they're going to be able to have their pick of a lot of great defensive players. Sonny Styles is a very popular player to end up there. I think that would be a great pick for them. Would love it if he fell to the Cowboys, but I don't think he will. But if they can fix this defense and at least make it a little more competitive, I think that will go a long way for them. Their defensive coordinator is coming from Minnesota, so we're going to get to kind of see how that Minnesota philosophy works in Washington. Very curious to see. But, yeah, I have the Commanders as just going in on the hot seat. A lot of questions. They were in the NFC Championship, the season before last, and now we're talking about, can they get back to having a winning record, or are we going to see 2 straight years of a losing record? They have so many starting positions up in the air. I know their beat writers are reporting that there's like a dozen potential new starters that could be on this team next year. It is just a crazy transition period. They went all in on a lot of rentals last year, and it just did not work out. So, and then my next teams, 2 more. I have the Browns. What else is left to say about the Browns? They're going to have to figure out all new offensive linemen. All 5 of their offensive line starters are up for free agency this year. They are in the red by $9 million currently because of the Deshaun Watson contract. They don't have a quarterback. Shadur Sanders is probably not their answer, so what are they going to do there? They have a new coach in Todd Monken. They just need so much help on the offensive side, and they have like almost no resources to do it outside of some good draft capital. No idea what the Browns are going to be this upcoming season. I have no idea in some ways how they're going to field a full team. I heard Colin Cowherd saying like the Jets have the worst circumstance. Like at least the Browns. No, the Browns. The Jets have at least some infrastructure on the offensive side. They have a pretty decent offensive line. They need to probably address some questions at their guard spot, but like they can do that. They have Garrett Wilson. Mason Taylor is fine. Breece Hall is probably coming back, it seems. Like, they have some good offensive infrastructure. I don't know how the Frank Reich experiment will work, but it is what it is. The Browns have nothing. The Browns have they have some decent tight ends and maybe some good running backs. That's it. That's it. Not even like great tight ends or great. Like, they have some guys that can play right to tight end and running back. They don't have like any receivers. Their offensive line is for nothing. They have no prospects at the quarterback position, and they have no cap to address any of that. The Jets have 2 first-round picks and $63 million in cap space. Like those 2 situations are not the same. So I'm just curious to see what the Browns are going to do about that. I don't expect them to be competitive. I think it's going to be a tough season and a tough offseason for them, but curious to see. And then my last team, I've already talked a little bit about him, but the Jets. When you fire all of your coaching staff minus Aaron Glenn, same thing we talked about with the Commanders, bright red warning sign. This is your last chance. They have no quarterback prospects. I don't think they're going to be able to get a quarterback in this draft unless they really want to take a swing on somebody after Fernando Mendoza. But I do like some of their infrastructure. I like some of their talent. Like, you look at their team, they have some questions on the defensive side because they are losing some talent, but I like a lot of their guys, so I'm curious to see what they do. They have a lot of money to spend. They don't tend to spend it well, and this goes back to the whole Sauce Gardner trade where everybody was like, oh, I love what the Jets are doing. They're loading up, and it's like, but what good is it if you're not good at drafting? Like, what have the Jets done to prove they can draft and develop good players? And they're getting 2 guys in this first round this year, and I'm just supposed to believe like that's going to work out. I don't know. I don't think it will because the Jets don't have a good history of that, but curious to see. So that is my top 10 most interesting teams this offseason. Very curious to see. As always, I'm going to be going through these teams post-free agency and giving my thoughts on how they did. And then I'm going to be right here for the draft talking about them. So tune in. And on Monday, I'm going to be going through 2 early predictions. Teams that'll miss the playoffs and teams that'll make the playoffs. So tune in for that. Until next time, love you, cherish you, appreciate you. Give me a like, give me a share, give me a rating. Going to try to get Christian on here soon. He's got his 2 early vibe rankings, so can't wait to tear those apart. So, all right, till then,